want to make you aware that in the fall we'll be conducting our first live demonstrative demonstration in terms of training on this property related to active shooter. We'll be working with our partners at the Highway Patrol, Homeland Security, who is here today, SWAT, the Sheriff's Department, SEC, Fire Department, etc., for that active shooter drill. And so that will be coming up in the fall. You'll learn more about it. You'll hear more about it. Will be more communication about that process as we get closer. But I want you to be aware that today is about learning and how to understand how to respond in the event these things happen, whether it's on property, at grocery store, or movie theater, other places that you may be at, and what your role and responsibilities are in those kinds of environments. So in preparation of this drill, we have the Office of Homeland Security here today to talk to us about this issue. He'll walk through sort of a 2-hour presentation, maybe time for Q&A if we get there, but kind of understand some active activities that have occurred that you've read about and have clearly seen on the news, and what our responsibilities are. We hope that you find this training information and invaluable. I know it's not something we want to be talking about, but I talked to one of our coworkers today. You know, the kids do this in school, which is really unfortunate. They have to do it, but I think it's pretty impressive that we're one of the first agencies. I talked to the GovOps folks maybe 2 weeks ago that is actually putting this in place. And I think we're trying to do everything we can to be in the best position possible for any such activity. It's with that, I'd like to now introduce our facilitator for today's discussion. We have from the Department of Homeland Security, and I can't understand this acronym, but it's the Security Supervisory Protective Security Advisor. Chris Riedel will be with us. What does that even mean? I don't know. He's an expert. We spent, I think, 3 hours together 2 Fridays ago with the executive team and many of the senior leaders, the division chiefs in this organization, with a tabletop on many of the things you're going to hear about today. This is an opportunity to really engage all of you on this issue. And with that, let me introduce Chris Riedel with the Department of Homeland Security.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you
very much. So, good afternoon, everyone. Doug, thank you for the invitation back this afternoon. To the emergency management team, Jessica, Nina, and everybody else. Really appreciate the opportunity to come out here and work with you guys. I'm going to walk around the stage. If at any time my mic cuts out, just kind of let me know. But my name is Chris Riedel. I am a Supervisory Protective Security Advisor. What does that mean to you guys? It means that I work for the Department of Homeland Security. I work for one of the DHS newest agencies. So we have the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. We are now, for about 15 years, we've been operating under the headquarters level, and now we stood apart, like Secret Service, like Coast Guard, and Health and Human Services, and other agencies. Our goal as protective security advisors, our cybersecurity advisors that are out there, is really to come out and work with public sector agencies and private sector agencies to raise awareness about issues like active shooter, workplace violence, some of the other topics that you hear about in the news. We really do it in a voluntary capacity, so we've been invited here to work with you guys. I've been actually working with your emergency management team with Jessica for going on probably about 2 years now. Everything from vulnerability assessments of your facilities to now they're working on the refinement of your active shooter plan and that addition that's going to go into your emergency management procedures document. But we're working together on that. We did the TTX that Doug talked about, which was really walking leadership, senior leadership and management team leaders through a sort of a scenario in an office setting focused on a workplace violence, kind of building up towards a workplace violence incident, and then actually the response aspects after the event kicked off. And so that was a great experience. I think it sparked a lot of conversation, and it's just, again, it's raising that level of awareness. When we're not doing this kind of thing, we are out doing physical security assessments. Yesterday I was up in Oroville. They have something called the Salmon Festival. Because of what happened at the Garlic Festival, the Salmon Festival, folks invited us up, and now we're doing security planning with them to just make sure that at a community level, they've got all the resources and capabilities that they need, that we bring to bear the experience we've had planning things like presidential inaugurations. I've worked Democratic and Republican national conventions. I've worked Super Bowls, and so from that experience of working those really sort of high-level events, we're bringing that down to the community level as best as possible. And so what I will say is if you hear anything today in the presentation that you think would be fitting for another part of your life. Maybe it's a house of worship, maybe it's your kids' elementary school, or your older kids' university, or some other aspect that you partake in your life that you think would benefit from a similar briefing. Come up and talk to me afterwards, and let's see if we might have the opportunity to partner with them as well. Doesn't cost anything. I don't say we're free, but we are taxpayer funded. But it doesn't cost the organization anything to have us come out and work with you guys, and so that's one of the values that we bring as well. I've been doing this line of work for about 23 years now. I was a Marine out of high school from here in the Sacramento area. Actually, I think we had our sober grad somewhere in the building here maybe at some time. I might have got caught down in the basement, doing a little drinking when I got here. But I don't think those guards are here anymore, so we're good. But so I grew up in the environment here, grew up in the area, joined the Marine Corps, bounced around the world, was a defense contractor for a little while, surveillance detection and counter surveillance work. And then I had an opportunity to come back and join forces as a state employee with you guys, working for the Office of Homeland Security under Governor Schwarzenegger. And so it was over on K Street, did that for a few years, and then got asked to come back on and be a Fed doing what I'm doing now. So I got to go to Maine for about 3 years and start a new office there, and then had the opportunity to come back here. So I've been back in this area since about 2012. I do a lot of briefings. But my territory is pretty much like most of Northern California, and then I manage everybody north of Bakersfield and all of Nevada. So my area is kind of big. I do a lot of travel, but it's always great to get out and hear the different stories that come from the organizations I'm working with. So if you guys have a unique perspective to offer during the presentation, please feel free to raise your hand, add in some stuff. To Doug's point, if we have an opportunity to get to questions, which we did in the last session, we will certainly do so. But here to hopefully talk to you guys about something that's probably not like the most happy topic or joyous topic, but because of things like El Paso and Dayton, because of what happened in Gilroy. For those of you that listened to talk radio on your way in this morning, you might have heard about other things going on, like arrests down in Southern California, arrests in the Las Vegas area recently. This whole active shooter, active assailant, workplace violence, sort of what we call soft targets in crowded places, the attacks that occur there, it's on the rise. And so we have to come out and engage with the communities as much as possible so that we can all band together. And I'm going to talk about like what the various responsibilities are, all the way from like big federal government type stuff we're doing to you sitting in the seat that you're sitting in today or sitting in the desk seat that you sit in normally. We're going to really hopefully, discuss ways that we can work on prevention. And so the two types of EAPs that I'm going to talk about today are going to be the Employee Assistance Program. And really, if I could just only talk about the Employee Assistance Program, that's what I would love to do. Because if we can get people connected with resources to get through tough times and tough things they're going through, we can hopefully interrupt them going down what might be the pathway to violence for them. If we can prevent it, right, that's the best scenario and the best situation for everybody. But just like we do all that we can to prevent fires, and we try to have good building codes, and we try to keep people aware of good behaviors, and we improve the electronics that are in here so they're not catching on fire under your desk. Just like all that preventative type stuff, we have to make sure that we're also ready in case that fire does break out, and in this case, in case the active shooter incident occurs. So I am going to talk the second half about the other EAP, and that's the Emergency Action Plan. And that's really organizationally what you guys are doing. But to today's focus, we're really going to talk about what do you do. So either what do you do as a team member individually, or what do you possibly have to do not only as a team member, but if you're in a team leader position, what might your employees or others around be looking to you for as far as guidance in one of these situations. So it does take about 2 hours. We got through it right at about 2 hours, maybe a little less this last time, but I will be here for that entire period of time, and then I'll stay afterwards just in case you guys have a few questions. So Jessica's going to drive the slide deck for me. Thank you. So I talked about the prevention and preparation side of what we're going to do, the two different types of EAP. I'm also going to talk a little bit about law enforcement response. I'm obviously not going to tell you exactly how SWAT would enter a facility like this or what they would do or how they breach doors and that kind of stuff. The reason I'm talking to you about law enforcement response is so that you understand it's going to look different than probably your normal engagement with law enforcement. Hopefully, most of your engagements have been shaking hands, buying them coffee, that kind of stuff out on the street, where it's been a positive interaction. This will probably be a very different experience for you. And so I'm going to talk about it to kind of help prepare you, but also so that you understand what they're going through when they're coming into the environment. We are going to talk about sort of your individual response, and then we're going to talk about leader's response. There's a muscle memory that's built in as a leader for your employees. When your team members are looking to you daily for advice and guidance on what they do during an incident, it's very likely that some of those employees are going to look to you for advice and guidance as well. And so you need to kind of like step up just a little bit more and be a little bit more prepared, or at least be mentally ready to go into that role. I am going to show you guys some active shooter response materials, but as I did with the last group, I'll say with you guys, internally here at CalPERS, your emergency management team has created an amazing portal that actually has an active shooter video series along with some questions about what you would do in a certain situation. It actually has a suspicious package component, I think, as well. And they've created that, and it's internal, and it's available to you guys, and it's no cost, and it is awesome. I wish that the organizations that I work for had very specific to our facility videotaped down to the level of the buildings we're in. We don't have that. We have these generic ones that I'm going to show you today. But you guys have access to that. And so I know it's not mandatory that you go in there, but man, I would certainly encourage you guys to do so. It's another resource that's available to you on this very topic. So while we do have access to national level materials, I always recommend taking advantage of the materials that are closest to where you work or live. We're good? Okay, so we're going to listen to some radio dispatch calls about an actual active shooter situation. It is a workplace violence situation, and it was an active shooter situation. We're going to listen, since we're going to listen to live actual calls for help and assistance. I want to let anybody know that if you are sensitive to hearing that kind of thing, and you feel like maybe you don't want to hear the dispatch, there would be nothing. There's no shame in stepping outside. It'll take about 10 minutes. We can certainly send somebody outside to come and get you. But for those of you that choose to stay, we're going to listen to some calls, and we're going to stop and pause and have some conversation about it. The reason I'm having you listen to it is this group that went through this. This is the San Bernardino shooting. Anybody familiar with that? Yeah, lots of nodding heads. Okay, so these are the calls of law enforcement as they were arriving to the scene and what they were going through. I'm telling you this because the folks that were attending the meeting at the Inland Regional Center, I know it's a small picture, but up on the upper left-hand corner of those pictures there, it was a business complex with several different office buildings in the area. They were actually visiting that space. It wasn't their space, so put yourself in the shoes of CalPERS has you go to a meeting or a conference at some other state building or some private sector building somewhere, and you're visiting the space. You're not super familiar with it. You're there gathered for the purpose of having a good day and having discussion, and all of a sudden chaos really breaks out, and evil is brought to that space that you're in. So we're going to listen to that. That's kind of a setup for this, and we'll pause in between and have a discussion.
Currently, the subject is still inside the business, 1365 South Waterman. It's in building number 3, possible active shooter. Copy, one suspect so far, male in black clothing. He's still firing rounds. Cover 2 more units down to the south side. The shooter's supposed to be in a parking lot. No better description on that location with a machine gun for this RP.
We're overhead. Everybody from the parking lot's been running into the north building on the north side. Security is out in the parking lot. Where you tell anybody else in the parking lot so far?
Cover Lincoln 3, do you have anybody with you?
Negative. I need 2 more units with me for an entry team. We got 2 shooter. We need an entry team now.
So you heard a couple of different things there. Obviously, there's 911 calls coming in, reporting an active shooter situation. Obviously, if something were to take place either in the workplace or somewhere else where you happen to be in life, again, movie theater, supermarket, place of worship, at your kid's school. If something's going down, getting information when it's safe to do so as quickly as possible, good information to law enforcement is key. And it's going to play out of how important that getting that information was for them to bring this situation to a resolution as quickly as they were able to. The other thing you heard was Lincoln 3. He actually came up here he's a lieutenant. He came up here to Sacramento and presented to a bunch of agencies, and he just happened to be eating lunch, right, in either the right place at the wrong time or the wrong place at the right time, depending upon how you look at the situation. But he showed up. Lieutenants generally don't respond to incidents, right? It would be like a senior leader, addressing like a customer service complaint, right? It generally is not the way that things are happening. But he responded, and you heard him say, "We have an active shooter. We need an entry team. We're getting ready to go in." So we'll talk about that a little later.
One suspect fled in a black SUV westbound from the location. We do not know if we still have an active shooter. We supposedly have 2 down inside. We'll be making entry.
We have several down in the conference, several down, several men acquitted.
We have at least 20 victims.
Approximately 1 to 2 suspects fled on Park Center Circle.
So you started hearing like vehicle description. Again, those are key things that are super important to be able to get to law enforcement as quickly as possible. A vehicle description is good. Even better is a plate or a partial plate. Or if you know that like your facility has cameras in a certain area and you could say, hey, it went out that direction, they can start looking into those cameras and getting, again, better identifiable information. With that information, the investigation can really go somewhere, right? So they can put out a be on the lookout, a BOLO for a black vehicle. How many black vehicles are out there on the road right now? A lot, right? So it's the better information you give. Hey, there was a big white scrape down the right side of the vehicle. Those kind of things that can help identify. There was a window broken out of the back. Those kind of things that can help identify. That's the differentiator where all of the public safety agencies that are out there are now able to start looking for a more specific vehicle.
We're going to set up a triage area on Waterman, just south of Park Center.
Separate.
I need some medical aid in here immediately. A near suspect's about 15 or 20 down. Travis, Cabrera, I'd like to get an access card. I'm at the main entrance. Where do you want me? Whoever has the access card to stage 1 is one of the fifth.
Sarge, you were covered when you wanted the announcements over the intercom. I do have access to that now. What would you like said?
Whoever's left in the building hiding, have them come to you so you can evacuate them. Be cautious. There's other teams in there, and be cautious of who's coming to you. Make sure their hands are up.
So there's multiple agencies responding at this time. When he says that there's multiple teams in there, there's people that chose to shelter in place because it was their best option at the time. There's people that you heard earlier in one of the other calls that were running out, evacuating the building. To some degree, that's going to be a personal decision. In certain cases, you might have the benefit of having like your public address system actually, give recommendations on what you may do. But that's going to be a very personal decision, sort of either way. To what you feel most comfortable with. You did hear in the prior call too, hey, I think we have 2 down, then it jumped to 20. I think there was maybe somebody came back on and said maybe 40, and they're talking about setting up a triage area, and so that's basically what's happening out there on the right, where they're trying to quickly ascertain, is somebody have life-threatening injuries, is this a cut and scrape, what's going on, but they're trying to do all of that, and we're going to hear about some additional complications of that coming up.
Subjects last of Farouk, Frank, Adam, Roger, Ocean King, first of Syed, Sam, Yellow, Edward, David.
Remember, the front of
Physical matches the description of one of the shooters.
remember, the front of your transmission was covered. He left where?
He was acting nervous, left the building. 20 minutes later or so, the shooting began. He matches the physical of one of the shooters.
So I talked earlier, this is a case of like workplace violence and active shooter. Unfortunately, this was an insider threat situation, which is a real true concern. They were engaged in the event. The individual left, somebody matching the description of the individual came back and started opening up fire. And so because they were able to get a name, right, that again is just an additional piece of information for law enforcement. They can start looking for what vehicles are registered to that individual. They can start looking for credit card receipts and ties into rental vehicles and all of that kind of stuff that is going to help them locate, close with, and neutralize the threat as quickly as possible. But it all starts with the reporting of the information and people sharing information with law enforcement.
We need to slow this thing down. I need you to advise all of the units to move with caution. We have a suspicious device that we've located in this building.
We have 2 witnesses that watched the whole thing start. They said there is 3 shooters with rifles, without a doubt. They said definitely 3.
Okay, so one of the two important pieces of information in there. One of which, the first one, what'd you hear? 3 shooters, right? Anybody that was familiar with the San Bernardino incident, how many shooters were there actually? 2, okay, that's right. So in the fog of war, right, while the incident is unraveling, while there's gunfire, while there's smoke, while the lights are probably blinking and the strobe lights are going off for the fire alarm and the sprinklers are turned on and there's people bleeding and lying on the ground around you, those types of details can get very confusing. But what happens to you guys, right, if there's 3 shooters reported and that they said 3 for sure, definitely 3 shooters, right? So later on, when they find 2 shooters, for everybody who decided to shelter in place, what do they got to continue to do? They got to stay in place, right? And they got to stay in place because law enforcement is still treating it as an active threat at the facility because they don't know where that 3rd shooter got to, okay? There was another thing that we heard that was really important. Why did he say we needed to slow it down? Suspicious device, right? Okay, so this has been happening overseas for a long time. A lot of experience with this in Israel, but other places around the world like Iraq and Afghanistan, where there will be an initial attack. Law enforcement and public safety will come in, and first responders will come in to help, kind of triage and start the life-saving process, and then they'll blow up something or detonate something or create a secondary attack to then get more victims, right? In this particular case, they found an IED, an improvised explosive device, in the room during the response phase, and now we know through the investigatory process that those individuals actually drove back by the facility and tried to command detonate, like remote detonate that device. So what was already an unfortunate count of victims could have become even higher, right? And would have just hampered additional response efforts because once you have one secondary device, you got to be worried about a tertiary device, and then it's going to really slow things down. So it is just something, unfortunately, that law enforcement is having to deal with as they're responding into the incident, as well as Good Samaritans and you guys helping each other out. Okay.
We are in pursuit of the suspect vehicle eastbound on San Bernardino Avenue from Richardson. We've got shots fired out the back window.
I'm copying traffic. My partner is transitioned in the back seat with an M4 rifle, so I'm going to be flying the helicopter and working the radios all at the same time. Go with that last information.
So you had an airship up that was able to start, calling in that, okay, one guy's gonna pilot the helicopter and the other guy's gonna jump in the back with a rifle. It's not common in this area actually to have SWAT really, really readily accessible, nor to have helicopter support. They happen to be doing training that day in the nearby area, and so they were ready to go. Equipment was there, personnel were there, they were switched on, and they were already in the right mindset. They actually kind of got lucky in what was a bad situation. It turned out to be better for them than what it could have been. As you heard that they were making contact with the vehicle in the bottom right-hand corner there, it started up at the Inland Regional Center. Sorry, this wire is kind of like pulling down my arm now. It started, is it still going? Okay. So it started up at the Inland Regional Center, and it ended up going mobile, right? They fled the area. I talked about the fact that they drove back by, but now they've made contact with the vehicle out in town. And what you could see up above the vehicle there, that's a white picket fence. They made contact in a residential location. That's why I say that, I'm here today to talk to you about workplace violence and active shooter situations occurring in the workplace, but it doesn't matter. This thing could end up in your front yard. It could end up at your kid's school. It could end up in your church, right? Wherever you are, that unfortunately when these situations go mobile, you've got to be aware and be ready to react. So we'll listen to the final one.
East San Bernardino, multiple shots fired. We need a Bearcat. We need medical aid.
Copy. We're getting them started.
We are at San Bernardino and Shedden. San Bernardino and Shedden. We can see one guy down. There's one guy in the back of a car that we need that Bearcat. Right now we have one down outside the car, one down inside the car. And then from what we understand is one's on the run.
Okay, so again, so they identified the vehicle was actually an unmarked vehicle that came up behind them. They called in marked vehicles as they started trying to execute a stop to see if this was the right vehicle. They actually opened fire from the back of the vehicle, and that all occurred right in that residential area, sort of mixed use residential and business area. But they ended up finding 2 shooters. In this case, they ended up taking both shooters out. But what did they say at the very end? They were looking for what? Third shooter, right? Because they were definitely sure, somebody was definitely sure third shooter. Now, I'm not, again, fog of war, it's really tough. I'm not blaming the person for saying that there were 3 shooters for sure. But it does mean for the people that decided that they were going to shelter in place, you're stuck. You need to have the capability, despite all of the other preparedness, planning, things that occurred like before that incident occurred, you need to be ready to take care of yourself. And so if you have a need for medications every couple hours, right? If you have a need to have food, maybe you got to keep your blood sugar up. If you've got other needs and other requirements, you've got to be ready in that environment to take care of yourself. So whether that's you keep a little something extra in the trunk of your car for when you're out and about, or you keep a little extra something at your desk, while you're here, those are the types of things that come down to sort of personal responsibility. Because if you get stuck in that environment, it can be a very long time, right? To clear just the first floor of a facility like this, to actually clear it, would take a very long time with a couple of teams to make sure that everybody that's in here is not a threat, to make sure that all the little crawl spaces and extra rooms and all that kind of stuff that you guys have here, to make sure that nobody's hiding out in those areas that still would pose a threat to responding officers, would take a very long time, like more than an hour to clear this bottom floor. And so if you think about 3,000 employees, 3 buildings, multiple stories, parking garage underneath, all of that stuff just adds to the complexity. So that's why I'm encouraging you to do a little bit on your own, despite what the agency and organization is doing for you, to do a little bit on your own to kind of be ready to take care of yourself. Okay, so as far as what an active shooter is, where they attack, that kind of stuff, again, I've talked about the fact that they happen at lots of different locations. They happen at, unfortunately, at houses of worship. They happen at elementary schools. They happen at universities. They happen at Walmarts. They happen at garlic festivals. They happen at locations that you either maybe been to or have had family members go to, or you drive by, or you know somebody that actually engages and goes to those locations. So we've had them kind of all over the place, including some facilities, and I'll show you later, I think in a couple of slides, including like even at a Department of Defense military installation, right, which you would assume is really, really locked down, and they have military police and they have all these protective measures, but it was an insider threat. The person was able to get the weapons in because they were a trusted person from inside the organization. Okay, as far as the profile of an active shooter, there's not one. So whatever you have in your head, when you hear the word active shooter and you put it in your mind, whatever that is, no. It's behaviors, right? Because we've had everything from teenagers to 65-year-old millionaires, right? The 1 October shooting, the Mandalay Bay stuff down in Vegas, that guy was like way outside of any profile that could have ever been established based on prior actions. We've had male and female. We've had all walks of races. We've had all walks of, again, age, background, religions, all that kind of stuff. So there's not a profile. What you can look for are the behaviors and the indicators leading up to somebody who's working their way down that pathway to violence. And so we'll talk about that later. Those are the things that I hope to leave you with. As far as the definition of an active shooter and kind of what it means to be in an active shooter situation, I will start out by saying this. We are going to kind of probably transition away from just saying active shooter and going more towards active assailant, right? And the reason we're doing that is because if you're in an environment where it's difficult for you to acquire firearms, but you still want to harm people, what else could you use? Knives, right? Edged weapons, explosives, a pair of scissors, right? Okay, maybe a vehicle, right? So we have vehicle ramming incidents. So it's really more about the person wanting to do harm. They'll find a way to acquire the weapon that they need to do that harm. As far as the active shooter situations being unpredictable, sure, I came here today to talk about active shooter. This is like a topic we're focusing on, but I'm not expecting that an active shooter incident is going to start out here in the hallway while we're sitting in this room, right? So if that were to occur, I've got to be ready on how to react to that. And so the unpredictability of it occurring means that you always kind of have to reserve a little bit of that processing power in the back of your brain to be ready to switch on to react to a situation. Whether it's an active shooter situation or a vehicle accident occurs out here on the road or somebody has a heart attack here in the room, right? Reserving a little bit of that processing power to be able to switch over to an emergency response type mode is a good recommendation. the individual is actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area, that basically just means that, yeah, you have a threat and it's ongoing, right? If it was just one shot and done, they turned the gun on themselves or they left the area, then that's not really what we consider an active shooter situation. As far as there might not be an apparent pattern or method in the selection of victims, yeah, that's true, right? So if you are a manager, team leader, and you have an employee that's disgruntled, maybe they got fired, let go a year ago, they didn't get a promotion, started acting up, but they're really holding a grudge against you, and they want to come in and they want to attack you, you may be the selected target. But on their path to get to you, if they've got to go down the hallway and up an elevator and down another hallway, there might be other people that they come into contact with, and unfortunately, those people may become victims. Or once the attack is done, let's say it's a love triangle type situation, right? And the spouse who's really upset doesn't work here, but the employee and the other employee that are having the relationship, they both work here. So somebody coming and going and finding those two individuals while they're in the courtyard here having lunch, but then once they commit that initial attack, they've already committed to going down a pathway to violence, and now they're just indiscriminately firing on their way out of here. Or one of those people gets up and starts running to try to get away, and they're just firing along the way, and you've got the cafeteria over here full of people, right? So it is a little bit of, in a lot of cases, we see that there was a reason why somebody went in there, unless it's just a true, truly just uninvolved or unrelated at all to the environment, and we don't see a lot of those, but again, you could end up being a victim whether you're chosen initially or not. And then as far as preparedness and awareness, so this is where we want to focus. This is what I said. I would love to just be up here talking about that aspect and not have to get into the emergency action plan. If we can communicate, if you can work with your team leaders, if you can work with each other as team members, and you can work with your team leaders to help people who are going through tough times get connected to resources, whether it's a mental health resource, whether it's financial counseling or assistance, whether it's some other help or aid that they need, then hopefully you can prevent them from feeling like the only option was to commit violence against other people. So that's where we want to address the situation if possible. These are some statistics. What I like to say about them is they are statistics, right? It doesn't really matter to you when the incident occurs in the environment that you're in, what these statistics say, but they do tell a little bit of a story. So about half of the people are deceased after the event. The large majority of those people commit suicide. So when law enforcement responds, you see it's only about 8% there that are shot and killed by law enforcement. When law enforcement responds, hey, they're treating this just like every other situation, and they're coming to try to stop the individual from being a threat. Once that individual puts the weapon down, displays that they're no longer going to be a threat to the officers or to the other people in the environment, they're going to try to take that person into custody. So as far as arrested, it makes sense that if 50% died, roughly 50% end up being arrested at the end. It is a high percentage, obviously 96% are males and 96% acted alone. So as of 2012, the numbers have just adjusted slightly on either side of that. But even in San Bernardino, right, we have seen situations where it was a husband and wife team and they were working together. It's uncommon, but it does occur. On the bottom set there, the workplace retaliation accounts for about 1/5 of the reason, the identified motivations. The domestic violence, so that might be workplace retaliation, again, somebody getting, passed over for a job, something like that. Whatever the cause was, somebody was sort of disgruntled and it didn't, turn out that they got their issues resolved in other ways, so they acted out in violence. On the domestic disputes, that can actually turn into a workplace violence situation. So if you have an employee as a team leader who has a restraining order against a spouse or some sort of loved one or somebody else that's just has an infatuation with them, if they have a restraining order against them and that person goes into hiding, right? They change their name, they start moving around to family members, they're going to different hotel rooms, they're like a really hard target to find. But if that person needs the resources that are afforded to them by keeping this job here, where are they going to be Monday through Friday, generally speaking, 8 to 5? Right? They're going to be here. And so if somebody was trying to track them down and it was a totally domestic, not related to the work situation at all, it could end up being that incident finds its way into your environment. Unfortunately, on the academic retaliation, former and current students, it's about 7%. On the no clear motivation, one of the best examples we have of that is that October 1 shooter from Vegas. Despite all of the intelligence digging that has been done, turning his laptops, flipping his social media, doing all of that stuff, he didn't leave a note behind. He didn't tell family members why he was doing what he was doing. He didn't tell associates or friends why he was doing what he was doing. There was no video. There was no social media posting. So we just don't know. He was way outside of any kind of norming pattern that we would have previously looked at. 65-year-old millionaire who was paying off his gambling debts before he even committed the attack. So it was just a really strange situation. So we don't know what happened there. These are some active shooter incidents that have occurred. I don't throw this up there to glorify the people that conducted the attacks. In fact, as I told the group earlier today, I actually consider, in most cases, the people who conducted the attack, the individual, the attacker, to be one of the victims, right? I do believe in right and wrong and good and bad and evil. I know that I believe that there are people out there that were just born a certain way to kind of hurt people and be evil, but I don't think they're in the majority. What I do think is that the people who are committing these attacks that have left that note behind, that had leakage at the workplace, that were telling people that they were frustrated, that were telling people on their social media posts that they felt alone or that they felt like there was no other answer. I feel like those people, if we just could have helped them, right? If we could have helped them avoid going down that path towards violence and committing that attack, we could have saved their lives and countless other lives that as you can see up here on the board, were lost. So these locations that I talk about here, you see 2 houses of worship, you see a movie theater, you see a couple of workplaces, right? Including one of the DoD installations, the Washington Navy Yard. So they occur at the places where you go. They occur at the places near where you live. They occur at the places you drive by, right? So these types of events have and do occur, and what I hope we can all do is work together to prevent future ones. On average, incidents last about 12 minutes. Again, averages don't really matter if it happens to you, but we present these so that you can think in terms of what would I be doing for that 12 minutes? What kind of island would you feel like you're on all by yourself with sharks swimming around, right? Knowing that there's danger, knowing that at any moment it could potentially come in and impact you, right? So for that 12 minutes or that 30 minutes or that 30 seconds, right, it's going to be a really, really tough situation to be in. And I hope that none of us ever face that situation. But should you do it, should you get into that situation, the average police response time is about 3 minutes. Now, that's to like time on scene. That's not to like time to take out the threat, right? And so for time on scene, you guys might actually have an average response time of a lot less here. But depending on where the attack happens on campus, right, and law enforcement's ability to get to that location really quickly, it could be a little bit longer, right? I mentioned earlier, so you guys, because you're in a state facility, California Highway Patrol has jurisdiction over your facility from a protective standpoint and an investigation standpoint. But in this environment, you'll have Sac City PD, Sac County Sheriff's Department. You might have some Parks and Rec, park ranger type, folks, wildlife, game wardens, and others that may come and join in the response effort here. And they could potentially, whether it's on bike or they just happen to be driving by, they could potentially be here faster than maybe CHP would be. As far as the catalysts or triggers observed, so each one of these individual situations was noted as a catalyst or a trigger for somebody to conduct a workplace violence or active shooter attack. I'm going to share with you today because the reason why I'm going to share with you guys is not just because I love sharing with large crowds, but because I want you to see that I take this personally, and I think that what I'm encouraging you to do by utilizing the Employee Assistance Program or helping others utilize the Employee Assistance Program, by being a good friend, being a good team member, just being a good human being, helping others that are in need of assistance, I'm telling you that it helped me. So I have gone through a loss of significant relationships. In the earlier crowd, the cousin of my ex-wife was here. I didn't realize that until after we had the presentation. So I didn't say anything bad, all right, which I'm glad. I'm not going to get any bad texts. But I did get divorced, right? I got married young, in Marine Corps, all that kind of stuff, got divorced. So I've had a loss of significant relationship. Change in financial status. I co-owned a couple of Jim Boy's Tacos restaurants for a period of time. Tacos were fantastic. The experience was not as fantastic. And so during the housing market crash in the Central Valley, we had to shut them down. And so that changed my financial status. The loss of a job. Well, when we shut that down, I was the VP of that while I was doing some other stuff as a contractor. And so that was a job that I lost. Change in living arrangements. I've moved, I don't know, like I think 13, 15 times, something like that. Been all around the world, have lived overseas, have done a lot of travel, and so different living arrangements and the stress that can kind of cause, I've been through that. Major adverse changes to life circumstances. When I went through the divorce, I have 2 kids. I've got a soon-to-be 11-year-old and a 14-year-old, and so we went from being this nuclear family to being 50-50 and kind of doing the blended family thing. That was a major change for me. And then on the feelings of humiliation and rejection on part of the shooter, we've all had some reason to be humiliated, right? Whether you tripped and spilled coffee all over yourself walking into the office one day, or your boss called you out and made you feel really stupid in front of your fellow employees, or whatever reason, right? You've been rejected for something that you applied for job-wise, or some sort of project you wanted to be the project manager of. Whatever the situation was, I've been through those. And so in these cases, just one of these, the person going through just one of these, it was enough to potentially cause them to go out and be an attacker. What is the difference, right? Why do some people that go through these end up becoming workplace violence attackers and some people just make it through, right? Well, it's having a network of people around you, having access to assistance, right? It's having the ability to know that people care about you that will keep you from going down some really, really dark, deep path, okay? And so if you personally have not been through any of these, awesome, you're living a pretty charmed life, right? But if you've been through any of these, right, you know what it's like to struggle. And maybe you didn't have somebody to help you, and that sucks. Maybe you just made it through, right? But would it have been easier to get through if you had somebody kind of, pat you on the shoulder and say, hey, dude, I know you're going through a tough thing. Do you need some help? Is there any way I can do anything for you? If you're a team leader and you know somebody's taking a lot of time off because they're dealing with something that's really tough in their personal life, maybe they're going through bankruptcy, maybe they're going through a foreclosure, maybe they're going through a divorce, right? Maybe there's a real bad custody issue. Maybe they've got a significant, health situation going on. If you know that that's going on, connecting that person with resources, again, maybe through the Employee Assistance Program is the right way to do it. And I'm sorry, I keep using EAP, but you guys have a number or something that you can call, right? Is that what it is? Through Magellan. Okay. Yeah, so the EAP through the Employee Assistance Program is the way to connect, is one way to connect people with assistance, right? There may be other ways as well that you're familiar with. So as far as identifying people in need of help, I talked about some of those catalysts and some of those triggers, right? I've talked about the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program. We're going to now talk about sort of what are some of those things that you look for, because you may be wondering well, what am I listening for? What do I know? What is it that I report? I'm not asking you guys all to start spying on each other and that kind of thing, but what I am saying is law enforcement, with all the training that they've had in how to identify if somebody's progressing towards, on the force continuum, progressing towards violence, right? Their body positioning, their breathing, the way that they're looking at them, all that kind of stuff. All that training that they've had does you no good when they're just driving by in their patrol vehicles outside. They don't have some magical telepathic way to scan everybody in the building here and go, hey, floor 3, cubicle 3, 315, I better get over there real quick because they're having a really tough time and they're potentially going to go on violence. They don't know any of that. They don't know what's going on in the average person's life. If they haven't had a reason to have contact with them, there's nothing. There's no record. That's why you hear about these shootings occur, and there was no prior record on anybody. With that said, who does know the people? You guys, right? So when you're team members and you're in a cubicle next to somebody and you hear the creditors calling, that's kind of a clue, right? When they're getting 20 calls a day, your partner in the cubicle next to you is getting 20 calls a day from creditors on their work phone, and it's disrupting their work. That's a pretty good sign that something's going on. So if you have a friendship with that person, trying to help them figure out how to connect with resources to assist them, I'm not talking about personal loans and stuff. I'm just saying EAP, right? EAP can help them with financial counseling, okay? If it's a estranged spouse type situation, if there's some sort of a dangerous situation going on and you hear them, hey, you can't call me, no, look, stop threatening me, whatever, and they hang up the phone, well, they might not want to come and share with you that that's going on in their life, but you're aware of it, right? And if you're aware of it, you should take action. And if you're not a good enough friend with that person to be able to have that conversation, then go talk to somebody who is a good enough friend with that person and make sure they're aware of what's going on and try to see if they can help that person. And if they can't, or that's not the right way given a certain situation, then go to their supervisor, right? Go to the supervisor and just say, hey, I want you to know about this. If a supervisor is part of the problem, then go to human resources, right? Go to HR and talk with HR and say, hey, I know I'm aware of an employee that's going through this. Don't even give the employee's information up at first. Just talk through the scenario and say, is there anything we can do or we should be doing in this situation? Those are all things that can help people get through tough times. And again, you're the best source, right? They probably spend more time around you daily, your team members, than what they actually spend around their family members. So you're in a really good position to know what's going on and a really good position to help them get assistance and to make human resources and your emergency management team or security, call your security, aware of something that happens, that's going on. So what are we looking for? This is sort of the pathway to violence, right? Going from the negative situation that occurs down to violent behavior. But there's steps in between. In some cases, those steps happen like really quickly, and there's not much we can do. But in other cases, there are stages, right? And there's delays and there's time. And in those opportunities are where we can inject ourselves to break that path. So there's not much you can do about on the negative situation. You can't really control whether or not your coworker is getting divorced, unless you're part of the affair, and then maybe you were a part of it, right? But on the social side, right? On the social side, you probably can't control friendships and that sort of thing. So on the political side, right? On the politics, we're like at odds, right? Different, various parties, two primary parties. And so if you have different political views and whatever, and the way the country's going right now and all that stuff, as an individual, there's not really much you can do about it. On the religious side, hey, religions have been battling against each other for a really, really long time. There's probably not much, again, as an individual that you can do to make a big, to prevent further, escalation of that situation. But those are negative situations. You can't control those for the most part. But those lead to, for people, intense feelings, right? So anger, hostility, vengeance, that sort of stuff, the retaliation feelings. These are things that are bottling up in people as they get excited or emotionally involved in a situation or an issue, right? And we all have gotten frustrated about something, right? We've all probably gotten like mad about at least one thing in your life, right? You can be the happiest person in the world, but you saw a balloon pop the other day at a park and you're like, that was like a really nice looking balloon, right? So it's normal to have feelings. But what human nature does in most cases is it causes us to leak those feelings out. And this is where you start to learn how serious is a person about those feelings that they're having. And so it's okay to say, hey, I'm really upset about that change that occurred, with our business process or whatever, right? But if you start hearing an employee who normally is like pretty even-keeled, and they start saying things like, hey, you know what? Somebody's got to teach these guys a lesson at work, right? Or if that manager talks to me like that one more time, right, it'll be the last thing he ever says, right? Those are the kind of things you want to be paying attention for, right? That on that ideas, that's where that leakage occurs. And those are the things where right after an event occurs, KCRA shows up and starts talking to people who knew the individual, and they say, you know what, you're right. They've been saying things like that. You're right. They told me, they made a social media post, right? Because it may not be that they're just saying it verbally, but they made a social media post on Friday that said, hey, to all my friends, don't show up to work on Monday, right? All right, that's a big deal, okay? I'm telling you, we're engaging with students in particular on their social media posts when they're saying things like that on not quite a daily basis, but on a weekly basis. Across the country, it's probably on a daily basis. But it's because we're taking those kind of threats very, very seriously. You're probably hearing those kind of threats being talked about in the news right now about like people saying that about Walmart. Don't go to Walmart, I'm taking my gun, that kind of stuff. That's happened. And those people, those individuals, when it's being reported, it's being acted upon by law enforcement. When it gets reported and they know about it, then it's being acted on by law enforcement to go out and make contact. And the way that they're making contact now in a lot of jurisdictions is it's a law enforcement officer who's there for safety, and it's a mental health professional who's there to help diffuse the situation if they can by just discussing what the challenges are that the person might be going through. So that's not available in all jurisdictions yet, but the county offices of health are trying to push that out. And there are some volunteers, great volunteers from the mental health field that are going out and working voluntarily with law enforcement agencies. But the reason why it's important to talk when these ideas are being discussed is because you don't know where somebody's at in the planning phase, right? So just this morning on the radio was talked about a Marriott employee down in Southern California who was telling his fellow employees that he was going to kill them and he was going to kill clients, right? Guests that were staying at a Marriott location down there. Because that got reported to law enforcement, they went out to the individual's home, and the reports are that they found an automatic weapon, high-capacity magazines, plans that were being drawn up. So in that situation, that type of situation, it was the fact that those ideas were leaking out of that person, whether they were social media posts or comments after a meeting or comments over beers after work. And so they were able to interrupt that while he was in the planning phase and hopefully save a bunch of lives. Because what you're trying to do ultimately is prevent it from getting down to the violent behavior, right? Again, if that violent behavior affects you personally here in the workplace, it's going to affect your team. It's going to affect all the reason why CalPERS is here to serve the employees of the state of California. And so it would have a lasting impact. Any interruption to your business, any interruption to the important services that you do affects even beyond just the employees that are here in the office. And so for that reason, we want to keep it from occurring. So what can you look for? On the thoughts here, as far as talk of previous incidents. Okay, so when the anniversary of a major active shooter attack occurs, like there was a recent anniversary of the Columbine attack, right? It's probably appropriate for, like if it's in the news, for people to be talking about it. Hey, well, wasn't that super sad when that occurred? And man, that really changed things. And that's really when I started thinking about, you know, how I need to protect myself or my kids at school. But if it's not the anniversary of Columbine, and somebody's talking about an attack like Columbine, and they're like super excited about it, and they're like trying to figure out ways they could have like harmed more people, and they're making those kind of comments, that's out of the norm, right? That's something that you need to be reporting to somebody. If it's at a place of business, then you need to find the right way, the right channel to report it at work. If it's outside of work, you still need to find the right way to report it. If it's not quite a 911 call because you're not convinced that the person is going to get their gun or drive the vehicle to that area right now where there's a gathering going on, if it's not like that level of 911 type criticality, or you don't feel comfortable calling 911, then you can call the non-emergency number, right? Every law enforcement agency out there has one. You can look it up online in your area, and you can make a report. And even if the person doesn't live in your area, but you see a social media post of a friend that lives back east, and it's really concerning to you, you can either call their local law enforcement agency, or you can call your local law enforcement agency and make that report, and that connection will be made, right? Are we perfect? Do we get it right 100% of the time? No, absolutely not. But I would ask you this, do you get your job right 100% of the time? No, probably not. Do you still show up to do a good job and do the best thing you can for the clients of CalPERS? You do. So we gotta work the system and utilize the system for what it's designed for. On the unsolicited focus on dangerous weapons, this is the type of thing where I like shooting. I teach my kids how to shoot and safe gun handling. I was up this weekend shooting. I like it. And you and I, if I find out that you like shooting, we might talk about guns, right? But I'm not looking at an incident like Gilroy and saying, man, if he would have used this different type of firearm, can you imagine how many more people he would have mowed down, right? I'm not having that kind of conversation with you. That's sort of a non-normal conversation about firearms or weapons, right? And so if somebody's having those kinds of conversations with you, again, that's another sign. I'm telling you these things because this is what has occurred. These are the feedback, right, in the investigation, all the post-mortem stuff that comes back out of an investigation. This is the stuff that's coming out of it. On expressions of paranoia or depression, okay, mental health conditions are real. Employee assistance program, I think your program utilizes Magellan to assist with getting counseling services. They're available. There's emergency counseling services, and then there's counseling services like if you're dealing with like a family emergency or something like, or family issue, something like that. There are resources that are out there.
Obviously, if somebody's having beliefs that somebody's coming to get them, that kind of stuff, that's a big deal. If somebody's just dealing with like a depression type issue, where they're sad about something, maybe they lost an animal recently, okay, that's kind of the normal thing. They can still reach out to EAP and get some assistance. But you're really looking for that deep depression, the paranoia that's kind of different than just like, if you have somebody who just constantly thinks everybody's after them and they've been that way for like 10 years, that's not what we're talking about. We're looking like for a change in their mental health, status. As far as the overreaction to changes, so it's changes in a lot of ways unsettling, right? And we are adverse to change in many cases. But it's normal to walk out of a meeting where you hear that like the policy or the process is going to change for you at work and be upset about that. That's okay. What's not okay is the overreaction part, right? So you walk out of the meeting, you flip the table over, you smack a monitor off the desk on your way by. That's not okay. That's not behavior you guys should be accepting at work. And so if that occurs, that's the kind of stuff you need to be reporting, right? If you're a team leader, you need to report it immediately. You need to get with human resources and the emergency management team and get with Colliers and deal with that situation, because there should be zero tolerance for physical issues at work. On the feelings, the depression, withdrawal, I kind of talked about that earlier. What you're looking for is a change, right? Somebody who's just kind of always glum. Okay, they're always glum. Maybe that's them, right? But you're looking for somebody who was kind of really happy at one point or normal at one point, baseline as far as everybody else in the environment around them, and now they've really withdrawn. I like to talk about, like, is there any Bobs? Are there any Bobs in the room? Okay, good. No, you don't want to admit it. All right, I'm not going to offend any Bobs then. So I talk about angry Bob, right? And so most organizations or most teams have had an angry Bob. Angry Bob, like where you might like be walking around like at this level. And if the top of your head is like how much tolerance you have for dealing with stress and not getting too angry, then you have a lot of ways to go, right? You always operate pretty nicely. You kind of communicate with people on a good level. Bob's like here, right? Bob's level is like always up here, always frustrated, angry with every change, suggestions, just, he doesn't want to hear them. Managers are talking and he's complaining, right? That's normal. But even angry Bob, right, has something where he would be going over the top, where he would be kind of bubbling over. So you've got to like gauge the person, and then you're looking for change. So whether that's in depression, withdrawal, unstable emotional responses, again, you're looking for a change. And that change is potentially signifying that somebody's going through some really tough thing in their life. And what are we going to do? We're going to call DHS, and they're going to bring a black helicopter, and ninjas are going to drop down, and we're going to attack them, right? No, you're going to help them with the employee assistance program, right? Sorry. So you're going to utilize the employee assistance program to help them get connected with resources. That's what this is all about. On the behaviors, increased use of alcohol or drugs. Again, no judgment out here. You like to tie one on, hit happy hour, have a Friday margarita, whatever it is. I'm not judging you, right? We might see each other out of those establishments. Did I talk about the basement here back when I was in high school? All right. So what we're looking for is somebody who might be utilizing alcohol or drugs in the workplace now to mask or try to like deal with the situation that's tough that's going on in their life. Severe medical issue, loss of a family member, significant financial issue, whatever it is, right? If they're starting to show signs of it where it's creeping over into their work, one, it's affecting your performance as a team, but two, they're dealing with something important, right? They're dealing with something that's troubling them, that's making them rely on that. And so if that's the sign that you're seeing, that's the symptom, it could be of a much larger problem that you're not aware of. So try to help them in the way that you can, the best way to get assistance. As far as the bottom three, violation of policy, increased absenteeism and exploiting or blaming others. When somebody's trending towards doing something, like maybe they're in that planning phase, maybe they've been leaking the fact that they don't think that like change is going to happen like peacefully, and change is not going to happen without some sort of major incident occurring at work. If they start going down that path mentally and planning wise, that might be why they don't care about the future of having their job, right? It could be that they don't care if they're here next month or what their performance appraisal looks like, right? Because they're not planning to be here. And quite frankly, they may not be planning on you being here to give them that appraisal, okay? So those are the things that you're looking out for. It's also that these things can be signs that something else is going on. So if you've got an employee that is absent a lot and maybe doesn't have a good reason for it and stuff, again, you want to connect with them. Don't just manage, right? Lead. So don't just like, hey, you came in 15 minutes late, I'm docking you again. You came in 15 minutes late tomorrow, I'm docking you again. Maybe that employee's got a problem. Maybe they got a problem getting the transportation that they need to get to work on time. Maybe they've got an issue with a sick kid at home. Maybe who knows what's going on in their lives. But if you take the time to connect with them, you might be able to get past the issue. Give them a little leeway, work out something with them, put them on some sort of performance improvement plan that's on a positive nature, right? A good way of working with them so you can get them back to being a productive member. So we're getting ready to end the first portion here, and we'll take some time for questions. But I started out by saying that profiles are not helpful, right? And they're not. Because of all of the variances that we've had as far as active shooters go, it doesn't make sense to look for one particular type of person, right? If you do, you're going to miss the person that's just off to the right of them that might actually be the one who's having that tough time, that's going down that pathway to violence, right? So look for behaviors, right? Look for the signs. Look for those symptoms that are evidence that there's a bigger problem going on in somebody's life,
Okay. On the second bullet there, I talked about the fact that, you guys are going to have better knowledge, in some cases, better knowledge than even their spouse or significant others, about what's going on in somebody's life and what their state of emotional stability is right now. Because you're sitting next to them. You're hearing the way that they deal with customers or colleagues, right? You're hearing the phone calls that are coming in. You're seeing the emails that are going out. You're hearing them and talking with them in the break room. Or they're not talking to you anymore when they used to be somebody that was pretty talkative, right? So you're noticing little changes because you're getting to study that person or those people on your team on a regular basis. So you have the knowledge, and it's going to be, this is your sort of component to this community approach, is you've got to be aware of that and know that there are processes in place to report. And if you are somebody who doesn't like to be I'm going to talk about this person, and you feel it feels kind of gossipy, or if you are somebody who doesn't want to necessarily get personally involved in the situation, but you should say something, you guys actually have an anonymous way to report things. You have your ethics hotline, and it doesn't just have to be used just for hardcore ethics issues. If you call that, it's a number, 800 number maybe? If you call that number and you file a report, you can do it, and you can do it anonymously. And then, hey, it's like monkeys off your back, right? You now are able to allow somebody else to deal with the issue, okay? If the issue doesn't appear to be resolving, though, and especially if it gets escalated, maybe you do need to think about, engaging in another way, maybe going to human resources or emergency management to talk to them about it. So that kind of ties into this third bullet here, which is that law enforcement will do their job, but they gotta, in order to do the job on the preventative side, right? It's sort of easier for them to get engaged when they get a 911 call, right? That's how they usually get called out. That's not the way they want to get called out, though, right? So the better way for them to get engaged is you guys are reporting things. If there's a real serious concern, again, I'm here talking to you in your workplace, but if you see somebody, if your kids see another high school, student who's posting something suspicious online, make the phone call. If somebody at your church is saying something, make the phone call. If you're at church or at the mall and somebody acting suspiciously is just doing something really weird, or you're concerned that they might be going in to do something, tell somebody. Go to security, call local law enforcement, right? Make the report. If it is here, you have, again, plenty of ways, like I talked about. You can use the ethics hotline anonymously. You can go to your team leader. You can go to your team leader supervisor. You can go to emergency management. You guys can go to human resources. There are ways to report. Don't get lost in the analyzing what's the best way to report. Go to what you assume is the best way to report initially, and then let them help you figure out if you need to go a different route. So that is the employee assistance preventative type side of the discussion. We're going to have 2 more bullets on the next slide that are going to kind of straddle the line between employee assistance and emergency action. But at this time, are there any questions? Yep, we got one question up here. Can we get a mic, please? Just 1 second, sir. We have some people that are streaming and on video. Sorry to reach in here for a second, but.
I've heard a number of articles, and I'm not sure if it's true, that it's indicated that for a lot of active shooter situations that individuals have been or currently are on psychotropic drugs. Is that the case, and would that fit in with the profile you've talked about in terms of behavior issues?
So I'm not as familiar with all of the medication type issues. That would probably be something that I would defer to a medical or mental health type professional to talk about. But can the usage of certain types of drugs, even if they're meant to be beneficial for you, like some of them that deal with depression and things like that, you hear that there's an increased tendency towards suicide or harming others or harming themselves. Yeah, that could lead to a reason, maybe potentially why somebody would commit an attack. Those are more difficult probably to identify, because if the person is appearing to be normal and the medication is working in all other ways except it's making them have these suicidal thoughts or violent thoughts, it may not be expressing itself in the way. But what we are looking for is when there are opportunities to identify, maybe the person who's taking that kind of medication is now making comments in the workplace about, again, I'm going to harm somebody, I'm going to harm myself, I'm going to teach them a lesson, that sort of thing. That's what you're looking for. It kind of touches back onto that paranoia part as well. I'm not advocating, look, all that list of stuff that I went through up there, I've been depressed, right? I'm sure that there are folks in the room that have been depressed. I'm not talking about just reporting somebody because they seem to be sad and be off a little bit. We're talking about like the serious ones where it's just definitely a noticeable change that you can articulate to somebody that you can tell them about. So not sure if that exactly answered your question, but I'd be okay doing the research and getting back to you if you wanted to. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
There are a lot of people that are trained and say they see the person that the officers are looking for. What happens to those people that intervene? I know it's not recommended, but if they take the person down, are they convicted, or what are your experiences with that?
Sure. So let me make sure I understand the question first. If you saw a situation, let's just say in here in the building, right, and you already are aware of the fact that they're looking for a particular individual, or you've like a good Samaritan
are looking for, yeah.
Okay. It depends on the situation. Honestly, I can't answer every situation and go through it. It's going to really depend on, were they an active threat, at the time, under what conditions, did you approach them? Would it have been better? I mean, we live in a very litigious society, so is somebody going to potentially, like even let's say in the worst case scenario, you decide to tackle the person and they fall down and they hit their head. Is it going to come back on you that the family members of that individual are going to sue you? I don't know the answer to all those specific questions. What I would say is it's kind of an individual decision, right? And what you want to be acting on is, what would a reasonable person do in this same situation? I'm certainly not encouraging. We're going to talk about run, hide, fight later, and fight is going to be the very last portion, very last resort is to ever make physical contact. But I will tell you that there are times when stepping in and stopping somebody from going further, even if it's just verbal commands, might be the right, maybe the right option to keep somebody from going towards the daycare center, right? If you see them trying to climb the fence and you're trying to, tell them to stop, right? So there's so many different scenarios that I can't answer all of them, but I can only say what I would do, right? If I felt like me intervening was going to save lives and I could justify the use of whatever force I needed to, I'm going to intervene in most cases, but I've got to do that evaluation, right? Is there a better way to do it? Could I pull a fire alarm and get everybody's attention? Could I yell and let everybody know, hey, back away, there's a person here who's having a problem, right? Is there some other way I can do it without physically touching somebody? That's what my first reaction is going to be. So again, if you want to talk about afterwards, I'm happy to have a conversation. Great question. Okay, no other questions right now. All right, I'll stay afterwards too, and we can talk, continue to talk. So these first two portions here are going to kind of straddle the employee assistance and preventative side and the emergency action side. So on the create a system for reporting signs of potentially violent behavior, yes, if it's the slow build, right, increased absenteeism, utilizing alcohol, smacks the monitor off the desk after the meeting, if it's that slow kind of gradual increase, right, in ramping up the hostility and anger and violent actions, then you're going to utilize the EAP, you're going to utilize, management and contact human resources and contact, emergency management and let colliers know what's going on. But there is also, right, a reporting process for if you notice like today, like somebody has a social media post that you're connected with that's at work that's coming here today and says they're going to do harm to people, okay, that's a reporting process. That reporting process, generally speaking, if it's an imminent violent threat, then you're going to go to 911, right? If it's a little bit less than that and it's between that and the buildup, then you've got to make a personal decision of what's the best option, and you're either going to contact emergency management or human resources or security, but you've got to really be the one to kind of make that judgment. The biggest thing is just report it, right? Report it, report it, report it. Let it become that it's nothing and you just misinterpreted the situation and they were acting out a skit. Those two people were acting out a skit because they're in a play group together and, after work they have their performance today. And hey, that's awesome. That would be the best case scenario, right? But just don't let it go unreported, because unreported is what leads to the attack taking place. And you afterwards, again, being on camera saying, yeah, no, I saw it happening and I just didn't do anything and I feel really bad about it, right? Okay, on the make self-care and counseling services available to members, we've talked about this. So there is the kind of just general counseling services that are available, and then there's like emergency issue counseling services that are available, like mental health breakdown right now is occurring, and you're going to help get that person assistance. But EAP is the way to get sort of the general one when it's a more emergent and urgent type matter. Again, you're probably going to work with the supervisors if it's here in the workplace, or choose the appropriate process when it's outside of the workplace. So now we kind of break into more of like what happens and what do we do to get prepared for an event to occur. And so your emergency management team here is working on the refinement of their active shooter plan. And then what will ultimately happen is the employees will be trained to the active shooter plan. I think Doug mentioned it earlier that in the fall you're actually going to have a drill here on campus for a limited scope location and number of employees that are going to engage in a drill for how to respond to an active shooter incident. It's going to involve public safety partners and others that are going to come in and help out and kind of walk through that process. But it all starts with having a plan and then making sure that you're aware of the plan. So once you hear that the plan is in place, just like you should be aware of what is the emergency action plan and what are the steps you're supposed to take as an employee, you should read this active shooter response plan as well. And if because of some cool experience you have in life, maybe you're like special forces somewhere or you're some super cool ninja type individual and you have like a recommendation of improvement, then bring it up. Once you've read it, bring it up to emergency management and try to provide that type of input. Maybe it can be a benefit. Maybe there's something in the plan that is missing because while there's a general plan, something specific to your business unit, something specific to the office that you work in, right? You need a little bit more guidance, right? And then that's an opportunity to work with them to get that additional guidance. Establishing safe areas within the facility for assembly and refuge during crises. Yeah, so if you can, I mean, in this building, there's a lot of, I broke my glasses playing soccer this last week, so I'm surprised they haven't flown off my face yet. So if in this building, a lot more like opaque walls and like little tiny slots along the doors and that kind of stuff where you can't really see in and see all the way across the building. So a little easier to find hiding places in a building like this. In a building across the hall is a ton of glass, right? And it's super awesome and it's probably like LEED certified and all that, but it makes it more difficult to hide, right? So when you're looking for safe areas to be, generally speaking, you want to be in a space where if you do have to shelter in place, where you can lock the door, where people can't see you just kind of walking by in the hallway, that sort of thing. So I can't speak to everybody's situation, but you should go back and as a team probably have the conversation about where would we go if something happened and we were told to shelter in place because of, in particular, in this case, an active shooter situation, right? So that's something to kind of think about. In the video, it'll show a little bit of like recommendations like go and close the blinds and do all this kind of stuff. Hey, if you got time to close the blinds, awesome, do it. But the bottom line is just get to a point where you can be in the safest place possible. If you have choices, there's a difference between hiding places, right? There's hiding like obscuring you to be able to see me. Like if I was behind like a curtain, right? And I have my toes dangling out at the bottom and I'm standing there, you might not be able to see me very easily, but you can shoot me, right? Pretty easily. Whereas if I hide behind, and I won't do it again, if I hide behind over here, right? If I had a choice between a curtain or this, I'm going here, right? I'm getting down. Now, this might not provide a lot of protection from bullets. I don't know what's inside of here. It's pretty sturdy. But it's better than probably hiding behind a piece of fabric. If I could go behind a load-bearing concrete pillar, right, like these pillars on the side, and I could hide behind something like that from somebody who's on the other side, I'm going to go behind the biggest, thickest, hardest thing that I can, right, so that I have the best protection from incoming fire. If you were to say leave the building, right, later on when we talk about run, hide, fight, if you were to run and you were to get outside and you were to go up the street, down the street, into the parking lot, whatever, if you had the option and you had to make a decision to then hide behind a vehicle, right, would you want to hide behind the trunk, which is empty, or behind the engine block, which is kind of thick and full of metal? Engine block, right? Okay, so those are the kind of things. Again, I can't detail every scenario for you, but if I was going to hide behind a bush or hide behind an electrical transformer, I'm choosing the transformer if I can, right? So all of that kind of stuff is like, those are decisions that you have to make. I know it seems like I probably like run through a million scenarios in my head and just like think about where I'm going to hide all the time. I don't, but I'm just trying to provide some ideas for you guys. Okay, on the communications protocols, as far as instructing personnel on what to do and take protective actions, especially if it's like evacuation versus shelter in place, you guys do have a public address system. There are some other potential mechanisms like text messages, emails, phone calls, like all that kind of stuff that can go out to kind of notify you about incidents. Probably if something starts happening, everybody's social media accounts are going to start lighting up and you're going to realize something's going on before the call comes out. But as a leader, you have that added sense of responsibility of how are you going to direct people what to do, right? And that's a big decision. That is a really big decision. Are you going to tell people to shelter in place or tell people to evacuate, right? Are you going to potentially, if you tell them to evacuate, do you know, are you sending them into harm's way, right? Because if you're sending them into harm's way, man, that's going to be hard to live with in the end. But if you're telling them to shelter in place and the attacker's coming down the hall and they could have ran out the other door, well, I don't know, right? So you got to kind of talk through those things, and it's very situational dependent. Okay, so reporting missing or stolen equipment. You guys, your general doors during business hours are open. Your parking lot's accessible. So you're not really stopping people from coming into the building. But in your many of your individual workspaces, conference rooms, that kind of stuff, the gym has like proximity cards, right? And so that's what's controlling people getting into the workspaces. And so if you were to lose your proximity card, your access badge, or whatever your ID, that's the type of thing you want to go to. There's actually a policy. Somebody was in here earlier from the office that had the policy and talked about there is a policy to have to report that. I don't know what the timeline was, but you report it as quickly as possible, right? Now, I'm not saying like if you come back from lunch and you get up from your car and all of a sudden you don't have your access badge, you probably don't need to go report yourself right away, right? Walk back down to your car, find that it fell under your seat, get it back out, walk back up. But if it like you lose it on like a Monday, don't wait till Friday to report it, right? Because if somebody intentionally took it from you to get access to the facility or to get access to your office space, then they might be using it. They may have done that to use it for a bad purpose, right? So what the organization would rather you do is report it. They'll turn off the proximity card. They'll log it in their system that it's a missing or stolen card. It'll flag wherever it tries to get used, and so they'll be able to call your security out there to address the situation, maybe look at the camera footage to see who has it and then make contact with them to see why they have it. But report it. You're not going to get in trouble, right? If you're the type of person that loses it every week, they're going to work with you on like a lanyard or something, to like tie it to you and like maybe implant the little chip in your wrist or something. I don't know, but they will work with you. On the See Something, Say Something campaign, that's the stuff that happens out at Sac Metro Airport. It happens at the Amtrak station if you take Amtrak. It's those public safety messages, right? That if you see something that's out of the ordinary, say something, right? And the whole process only works of if you see something, you say something, right? Because if you see something, you don't report it, or you don't talk about it, or you don't do whatever. If you go to Golden One Center, anybody been to Golden One Center? Been to King James lately? Are they still running the advertisement? I haven't been there recently. Okay, well, NBA for a while was working with us at DHS to do this whole See Something, Say Something campaign. And Golden One Center had like where you could text a number while you're sitting there. If you see something, somebody's getting a little too tipsy, there's a fight getting ready to break out because the teams are rivals and the fans are getting crazy, or some other just issue, right? A kid is missing, right? You can text this number and it'll be a report. Same thing at the airport, but you should also you do have something here, right? And so I've talked about the fact that you can talk to Collier Security if you see something, and it doesn't have to be something just with a team member, right? There's a large homeless population down here. Some of those folks are suffering from mental health, issues. In some cases, there's a lot of drug usage going on, and so it could just be that you see somebody out in the quad here, or somebody down in the garage, or somebody is just displaying some sort of behavior that's not normal. And even if you don't recognize them as a fellow employee, you could still report it to Colliers. I was on campus. I don't know, a couple weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, I think for the TTX, the tabletop exercise. And there was an individual. You guys have a beautiful campus, by the way. I wish I ever had an opportunity to work in beautiful buildings like this. I was on campus, though, and I could see why somebody would want to take pictures of certain things across your campus, right? Some of the artwork you have, some of the cool trees you have, that kind of stuff. The architecture even. But when I was here, and I was waiting to meet up with Jessica, I was getting my parking validated, I looked, and there was this kid, and he was kind of like standing up in the turf area near the park, sort of space, open space, like, and the building's across the way. And he's taking pictures of the building, and he's taking pictures of the trees. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's really cool. Like, that's actually probably a pretty cool picture. But then he starts taking pictures of the doors, specifically the doors. And then he turns towards the kids' area, the daycare, and he starts taking pictures of the daycare. Now, okay. Again, I'm looking at the trees, and I'm thinking, no worries. I would probably take a picture. That is pretty cool. That'd be like a cool screensaver. And then I start, like, the pictures of the doors, and I'm like, that's weird. And he turns towards the kids, and I'm like, nope. So I walk up, and I was like, I was like, hey, how's it going? And I just approached him, right? And I said, and I'm going to talk about this later, this customer service, security through customer service. I just said, hey, how's it going? He's like, oh, pretty good. And I was like, hey, I noticed you were taking pictures. I was like, are you doing like a project? You work with CalPERS? He's like, no. I was like, oh, so what is it, what was interesting, to you about this? And he said, well, he's like, I work for this real estate company and we're trying to build a thing downtown here. And I think this is really cool. And I was like, you guys gonna have like a daycare or something? And he's like, oh, I don't know. And I was like, okay, well, I was like, you got a card? Because he told me he worked for a company. So he like pulls out a card and then Jessica walks up and I'm like, hey, have you met Jessica? She works for the emergency management department. She actually works for CalPERS. I was like, you guys probably should meet. And so I just engaged in that conversation, right? So I engaged in that conversation with the person because they were doing something a little odd, right? So what I'm saying is like I saw something and I said something, right? So not only am I encouraging you guys to do it here, I've done it here. So if I can do it here and I'm noticing things are out of the norm, I guarantee you guys are noticing things that happen out of the norm, right? And just report them, right? Try to get out ahead of an issue ever occurring. If you happen to be planning something like a big gathering, you're gonna have some sort of special thing, whatever, a holiday party, something like that amongst your team. You're gonna have a lot of people together in a certain area. Work with your emergency management team and let them know that that's occurring. And maybe they might have colliers come over and pay a little extra attention to the area, right? If it's a big enough event and it's a CalPERS kind of wide thing, then maybe your emergency management team is gonna work with public safety to make sure that there are officers, if not here, but close by, right? Anytime you're bringing a lot of people together for an event, you want to increase your security because it becomes sort of soft target crowded places, which is what we're really concerned about. And then consider the enhancing security through customer service. This is the may I help you approach. That's what I did to him, even though I wasn't one of your employees. But you can do it too. And I will tell you how this type of approach probably saved lives. Several years ago, there was a gal that was frustrated with YouTube and their change of policy. She was like a content provider, a vlogger, or whatever. I'm not hip to all the lingo. But she was a vlogger or something, and she got paid based on how many clicks were on her site or advertisers or whatever. And they changed the policy, global policy, and they said, no, you're going to get less money, you're not going to get money, whatever. So she's complaining, emailing, phone calls, faxes, irate, feels powerless. And on a slide earlier, I talked about when you feel powerless, well, it was up there, I didn't actually hit on it that much. But if you feel powerless and you feel like nobody's listening to you and nobody's taking your advice, you want to go confront the person that you feel is the problem. So in her case, she got in a car, she drove up from Southern California to the Silicon Valley area, and she went onto the YouTube campus, and the first time she went onto the campus, she pretended that she was there to get a job. So she made her way into the lobby, she talked to people, she looked around. They know this because they now, after the attack, said, hey, she looks really familiar. Oh, they did some research. Yeah, she was here yesterday in the lobby at this time, right? So what she did was she went in the lobby on day one, pretended that she was there for a job, got the application information, bounced. Went and lived in her car for like a day or two, whatever it was, and she came back, and now she knew the place, right? So she had kind of cased the joint a little bit, and now she's back on campus, and she starts approaching from within the area of the employee parking garage area. She worked her way into there, and then she worked her way into like the courtyard area, kind of like a courtyard area like here, but it would be like their entry area, kind of more like across the street. And as she's approaching, an employee notices she doesn't have a badge on. She's not wearing the whatever the cool YouTube shirts are or whatever. And so he just, can I help you? That was enough to disrupt her, to think that she thought that security was probably onto her, right? And so she drew her weapon at that point. There were still shots fired, but it was shots fired on the exterior of the campus. The response resulted in her being taken down, and it did not happen in the lobby where all of the people were at that time of day that she was intending to go in and shoot, and then would have had access to go into other parts of the building and shoot other individuals and create additional victims. So on the customer service aspect, you can approach somebody and say, right, talk with your team, talk with emergency management, see how they'd want you to do it. But you can approach somebody who doesn't clearly look like they're there, that has business with CalPERS, or maybe is looking a little off, and you can approach them and say, hey, can I help you? Can I help you find what you're looking for, right? And that gives you that opportunity to engage with them. They just have a regular conversation. Hey, yeah, I'm here because I'm a client and I have an issue. Oh, let me get you to customer service, right? And escort them across to customer service. If you're the type of person that doesn't like doing that and doesn't want to interact and is kind of concerned based on the YouTube situation that, you know, there were shots fired after the contact was made, totally get it. So what you do is you go to that other employee that's close by and you're like, hey, what's up with the weirdo, right? And then you're like, you got this, all right? And you walk out, right? So, but at least you did something, right? You saw something and you said something, and you hope that now, hey, the hot potato, you know, they're holding on to it, okay? So that's another way to kind of approach the situation. You guys do have access controls. Again, I talked about the importance of reporting when when your card goes missing, or, you know, keys. If you happen to be like a facilities person, you have hard keys. When those go missing, definitely important to be reporting that. The critical items. So you guys do have an ERT, emergency response team. ERT has some bags. So there's like first aid and AEDs, and I'm sure stuff that's like generally, you know, located throughout. But as far as these special bags that have additional resources in them that would allow you to have some food and some water and flashlights and that kind of stuff in an extended situation, those are distributed to the ERTs. There are some tourniquets and some other things that they're being trained on how to use. So if you're not a member of the ERT and you're super excited about becoming a member of the ERT and getting your own special little bag, you might want to talk to emergency management. But here's what I would say. Is it a guarantee that the ERT member is going to be there at their desk? No, right? They might be on a conference call, they might be in a meeting, they might be on vacation, right? And so if you can't rely on that person being there 100% of the time, what's the next thing that like you could do? Maybe have some stuff of your own, right? So I have a bag of my own. I have stuff that I can reach in and grab and you know, hopefully save your life or help you save my life. And so I have a few little supplies, right? I'm not talking like bee stings and Band-Aids, right? I'm talking like life-saving stuff that can actually be utilized. I train with it. I know it. I rip open the packages, see what's in there. If it's supposed to be sterile, I buy two so I can rip open the one, look at it, mess with it, let my kids mess with it and learn about it, because I don't know, maybe something's going to happen when we're out doing something together. But I encourage you to have your own little supplies. It doesn't have to be like a big, you know, Pelican case and, you know, huge, you know, backpack, but a little tiny backpack. You can fit a bunch of stuff in there. And if you think it's expensive, I guarantee you start doing some research on Amazon, you're going to find it's not very expensive. My bag cost me less than like 15 Starbucks, right? So for those of you that are drinking Starbucks, right, I could save your life or you could save my life for less than 15 Starbucks, okay? As far as the coordinating with safety team, they're doing this to ensure location security. So if there were to be like a fire drill or something like that, or a fire alarm gets pulled and you guys are supposed to all muster in a certain area, part of what CalPERS is adjusting to do is they're going to go out and they're going to kind of check the area out before everybody kind of files out to that area to make sure that it's safe, right? So that's something that they're doing. Again, I talked about the crisis kits. I suggest that you have your own. You do have a no weapons policy here at CalPERS. Most state buildings do. And so I would definitely, you know, if you have any questions about what you want to put in your bag, but you're not sure if you can put something in your bag, I would talk to emergency management and see if it's approved. And then as far as activating the emergency notification system, you're going to see in the video, what we recommend, like for calling 911 or any of that kind of stuff, is you get to a safe spot, and then as soon as you can, you call and make notification. So if the issue is happening in your environment, in your end of the building, on your floor, in your wing, in your cubicle area, there's a good chance that emergency management or call your security isn't going to know about it until somebody reports it, right? So just know what the reporting process is. I do think that most of your calls, if you do the phone call from like the hard phones, I think if you dial 911, it's going to notify colliers that something's going down, right? So so that's just, you know, just help the folks that are going to let everybody else on the campus know. Help make sure that they're aware that an incident's ongoing so they can make a decision about notification. Okay, so as far as the designated official for media inquiries, raise your hand in here if you're the public information officer or public affairs officer. No? Okay, so guess what? You don't talk to the media, right? And there's a great reason why I'm actually telling you that, and it's pretty serious. Something happens in this space right now, right? The gentleman here gets shot. He's laying on the floor, right? He succumbs to his injuries. I guarantee he doesn't want his family members to find out because I go blab my mouth on KCRA, right? He's going to want the appropriate process to take place. And that's what each of you would want to have take place out of respect for you and respect for your loved ones, right? So please don't go out there and talk about, the incident as it's going on. Don't be an iReporter. Don't do any of that kind of stuff, right? Let the public affairs officer, whose name is Brad. Okay, let Brad know that the incident's ongoing, and he and his team of professionals that deal with this on a daily basis, that's what they're going to do. Okay, so as far as the facility has established a family hotline, we've talked about this, and it's either in place or it will be in place. It's being discussed that last thing you want to have happen if something's happening here is your family members driving here to see what's going on because they're hearing about something in the news. So whether it's through internet, intranet, emails out to family members that have been designated on your emergency notification card or whatever you guys fill out, that process is being discussed. And then also even for employees, right? So if there are employees that are away from the work site, how do they get information about an incident going on back here and know whether or not they're supposed to come back to work or not come here? As far as victim identities, managers, team members, you might have to help out with that, right? So if somebody gets up from their desk and walks to the bathroom and they didn't have their ID card on them and they didn't report it to security because they lost it 2 days ago, then if they're found somewhere, it might be difficult or there may be a delay in helping to identify who the person is. So you may get asked to participate, but normally that's like a human resources and emergency management type function. As far as counseling to members and families, team members and families, so yes, I've talked with your emergency management team. There are contracts in place or there's a process in place where if something really bad does go down that you're going to have the ability to access grief counselors, right? And while that's super important for employees because what we're trying to do is get back to like what the new normal is, right? And get recover from the issue and get everybody back online and get back to the business of helping the people that invest with you in the state of California. It's also could be important for your family members. So maybe to you, like you're in shock still or whatever, you feel like, hey, I'm going back to work and you're like ready to roll. Or maybe you just experienced some really bad things in your life prior to that event. And so it's like, this doesn't faze you. And so you go back to work. Cool. But what about your kid? Or what about your spouse that thinks like this could happen again and they're terrified, right? And they're really worried because they heard what happened. They saw it on the news and all that. They may need counseling. And so there will be counseling services that are made available. As far as returning to the work site, work within your normal structure, your normal chain of command about getting information. If there was a disruption to that chain of command because of the incident that occurred, then figure out, call your HR numbers and other numbers that you have access to. The one thing that I will say is we're all like slaves to our phones now, and we don't really remember phone numbers for the most part. And so if all of your important information and how to contact the people that you work with or the manager or whatever, if it's all in your one phone, well, I tell you what, when shots are fired, my phones are both sitting over there on that podium. And if the shots come from that direction and I'm going that direction, I'm not running back to get my phones. So make sure that you have a list of important phone numbers back at home. Make sure you've given a list of important phone numbers to a family member or a spouse, and so that they know how to get a hold. But you're going to want to reach back out because you may not necessarily be returning to work the next day after something big goes down. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the law enforcement response. Sorry, let me just check here. Great timing. Okay, so on the law enforcement response, again, not going to talk about the tactics that SWAT's going to use to break into the room here, breach doors, all that kind of stuff. I don't tell you guys that because, God forbid, anybody in this room ever decided to go down that pathway to violence. We wouldn't want that information out there, right? It's not really necessary to be out in the public. But I am going to talk to you about what to expect should you be in a situation and law enforcement arrives on scene, and kind of what they're there to do and what they're not going to be able to do right away, and explain to you again why you're on an island for a period of time. A couple of minutes, a couple of hours, whatever, you're by yourself. So I want you to kind of be aware of that. Okay, so bottom line, law enforcement is there to locate, identify, close with, and neutralize the threat as quickly as possible. Now, neutralization does not necessarily mean that they're going to kill the enemy or the attacker. It just means that they're going to stop the threat, right? They're going to approach the individual. Potentially, as we saw earlier, there are a lot of suicides that occur after these types of attacks. So maybe the individual's already taken themselves out, but they've got to go to where the threat was. They've got to get close, and they've got to identify the individual and then neutralize the threat. And so the way pre-Columbine that they used to do it was they got out the yellow tape, put the big yellow tape, barrier around. The hostage negotiator showed up at some point. They started talking to the individual or trying to talk to the individual. Just like in the movies, the SWAT guy was there. The commander's like, hey, let me just go. Let me give a green light. And so that discussion was taking place, and it took time, right? Sometimes hours. And what they learned was, unfortunately, and Columbine was a big changing point for this, what they learned was that people bled out that could have been potentially saved from the time when law enforcement was already on scene to the time when they entered the facility. Now, that's not a knock on law enforcement. It's a change. It's an adaptation, right? They had to realize that there was a problem with the way that they were doing things before and make an improvement. And so what they've improved to now is as few as one officer showing up in some jurisdictions and some locations will go in and try to get to the threat as quickly as possible and neutralize the threat. In some cases, it's two. You heard earlier in the audio dispatch calls, Lincoln 3, the lieutenant said, I need 2 other units here. We need to make an entry team. So apparently they go in with 3, right? Whether it's 2, 1, 3, 4, doesn't really matter. Law enforcement's job is to go in there, get to the threat as quickly as possible. Now, they probably maybe have a description of the threat. Maybe all they heard was there's an active shooter. It's on the 3rd floor in building whatever, right? They don't even have a description of the person. So as they're coming into the facility and you're all exiting the facility, right? They're looking at every one of you and they're looking to try to determine if you're a threat to them. And if they don't have a physical description, if they don't have a clothing description, they are looking at every single person's hands to see if they're carrying a weapon, right? So in order to not become another victim, right, accidentally, don't carry things, right? Let it go. Leave your purse, leave your wallet, leave your cell phone, leave your logbook, leave your whatever you thought was super important before in your life, before that moment, leave it behind, right? Replace it later or retrieve it later. So as you're coming down the hallway, these officers are potentially going to be wearing things that maybe different color uniforms, right? Normal police blues like Sac City PD wears, the khakis that CHP wears, the greens that the game wardens wear. SWAT might be coming in full up tactical gear with helmets and vests and all kinds of cool looking stuff. So you may have plainclothes officers, right? In the case of the San Bernardino shooting, the first vehicle that pulled up behind the SUV was an unmarked vehicle with plainclothes officers. You might have them engaging, but normally they will then display, some sort of a lanyard and a badge, or in some cases they have like a sash that they pull out and put over their shoulder and it says police. So it's going to look different, right? Some guys are going to come, some officers are going to come, bike patrol officers, they're going to have little shorts on, right? So you just don't know what you're going to get, but just be aware that, you may have different, it may not always be like what your typical images of law enforcement. They'll come with different types of weapons, whatever they have, whatever they need to come in. And they might have to utilize tear gas or pepper spray, just being aware of that, again, sight, sound, smells. And then they're probably not going to be talking to you in the way that you've hopefully had engagements with them in the past. Buying them coffee, paying for their meal at a restaurant. It's probably going to be very loud, very aggressive, and what they're trying to do is determine if you are a threat, and if you're not a threat, they want to get you past them so that they can go towards the threat. So to that point, generally speaking, when you walk out in a hallway and you're trying to go down this way and you see law enforcement coming towards you, if you have the option to go towards law enforcement or go away from law enforcement, my suggestion would be to go towards law enforcement. Why? Because they're not going to pass what they understand to be an active threat, right? If the active threat was further down the hallway, they would have stopped to address it, right? Now, I can't account for the fact that somebody plays possum or whatever, right? I get that. But generally speaking, you're going to want to go in the direction that law enforcement is coming from, unless they're giving you a different type of command. You're going to want to go in the direction that they're coming from because they've just cleared the area that they were at, right? So by and large, that's a general rule. But they could shout at you to get on the ground. They could shout at you to get up against a wall. They could shout at you to, whatever they tell you to do, those are the directions you want to follow. For some of you that are deciding to volunteer for the drill in November, follow law enforcement's commands. Follow law enforcement's commands, right? It is a training situation, but it's going to be an opportunity for you to test yourself under stress and see if you can react to those types of commands in that situation, okay? All right. This top part is okay. The remain calm is kind of funny. I just leave it in there because that's what they put. All right, remain calm, everybody. It's an active shooter situation. All right. But the follow officer's instructions is really important, and then the buddy system for access and functional needs. Okay. So if you work with somebody, one of my colleagues is deaf. If the only way that we are finding out about an incident occurring is by somebody yelling it or by an announcement on a PA system, then in my place of work, I've got to make sure that I go and grab my colleague and bring him with me. And if the only sign that we have towards I'm going towards danger or away from danger is the sound of gunfire, then I've got to make sure that my colleague goes with me away from the sound of gunfire, right? So in that case, we've already kind of thought through that with this colleague of mine and his functional need. If you work with somebody who's in a wheelchair or has mobility issues, if you work with somebody who has a vision impairment, if you work with somebody who has some sort of other issue, you can work with the emergency management team, and there is a buddy system already in place. But making sure, especially if you're a team leader, making sure that anybody who has an AFN challenge is already connected with that program is good. And I call it the buddy system, but what is the formal? Special assistance program. Okay, so if you are a team leader, I would go back, check, make sure it's all squared away and good to go, and then you're, just annually or whatever, with whatever frequency, make sure it's tested and known. I already talked about putting down items in your hands. Immediately raise hands, spread fingers, keep hands visible at all times. Avoid making quick movements towards officers, such as holding onto them for safety. So again, officers coming into the environment, they are here to go to the threat as quickly as possible. So if I was hiding behind, the pillar here, the podium, and an officer came walking behind, I run up to grab him, hey, I need your help, right? I mean, I might startle him or her bad enough, and they're already in a heightened sense of awareness. I don't want to do that, right? So one, I don't want to get, knocked in the side of the face, and two, I don't want to potentially get shot, okay? So don't go making quick movements and don't go holding on to the officers. They are not there, unfortunately, in those immediate response moments. They are not there to help patch people up and help make people feel better, right? They're there for one job only, right? They're going to that evil and they're putting that evil down, right? So in that situation, they can't stop and help you. You can't go get them and ask them to go help your buddy, that's hurt in the break room, right? That's just not what they're there for. They're gonna go, they've got to neutralize the threat, because guess what? When that call for help went out, that went out to a really, really wide network of individuals. The fire department, all the paramedics in the area, volunteers that happen to work downtown here that have their radios or have their systems on to get, text alerts. And that whole cavalry is coming. But guess what? If you're not armed and you don't have armor and you're not a law enforcement individual, you're not coming in here until this is known or considered to be at least a warm. When it's hot, when the attack is going on, it's hot. Nobody's coming in except for like SWAT and law enforcement and the tactical medics potentially. But even tactical medics are just there to make sure the team can get to the threat, okay? So if you want the fire department to be able to come in and you want the paramedics to be able to come in, let law enforcement do their job when they initially show up. Avoid pointing, screaming, and yelling. Again, it's going to be a chaotic situation anyway. The lights may or may not be working. The strobe lights from the fire alarm, somebody probably pulled the fire alarm, so the fire alarm's going off. If they shot and hit a sprinkler, the sprinklers are going. It's their first time in your building. Add to all of the complexity with people running down. And anybody ever been to that middle school dance with the strobe light going? How weird did it look anyway, and you knew what was going on, right? But all that going on and people running towards you and there's a threat, right? It's going to be tough, right? So whatever you can do to bring down the tempo, especially when you're in direct, face-to-face with law enforcement, do it. You also might want to avoid screaming or yelling, because if you don't know where the threat is, right, you don't want to give yourself away. If you're in that hide situation, you don't want to be doing that. Okay. Next up. Okay, so we're going to watch a video here. We're going to do a couple things, and then we're out. We're going to watch a video here. It's called Options for Consideration. It is what is your responsibility as a person, right? What do you do? The video does take place in an office setting, so it's somewhat applicable to here. But what do you do if shots were to be fired, and what is the response that you can expect from law enforcement? It's going to be kind of covered here. We'll then talk about like what is the additional kind of like part. We'll just review real quick what the additional part is for leaders, for team leaders, and then I'll talk about the active shooter response materials that are available. Again, I think what I would refer you to first is to go through your portal, and apparently your portal actually has links out to our active shooter resources. So I think that would be the best thing, and then we will end with run, hide, fight, a discussion on that.
We have an active shooter. Stand by for further information.
Tragedies such as the 2007 mass shooting on the campus of Virginia Tech, the 2009 shooting at the Fort Hood, Texas military post, and the 2011 attempted assassination of Representative Gabrielle Giffords at a public appearance in Arizona are all examples of active shooter situations. An active shooter is an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people inside an occupied structure or outside in a populated area. In most cases, there is no pattern or method to their selection of victims. Active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve quickly. It is important to be prepared for such an event. Make it a practice to identify potential escape routes and have a plan in mind, even if you are just visiting a facility. In the event of a shooting at your location, you must quickly determine the most reasonable way to protect your own life. You will need to determine if the best course of action is to evacuate or to hide. Call 911 when it is safe to do so. If there is an accessible escape route, attempt to evacuate. Be sure to leave your belongings behind. Help others escape if possible, but do not attempt to move wounded people. Evacuate regardless of whether others agree to follow. Warn individuals not to enter an area where the active shooter may be, and follow the instructions of any police officers. If evacuation is not the best option, find a place to hide where the shooter is less likely to find you. And be sure your hiding place does not trap or restrict you or your options for movement. Consider the difference between cover and concealment. Cover will protect you from gunfire, and concealment will hide you from the view of the shooter. Quickly choose the best option. If you are caught out in the open and cannot conceal yourself or take cover, you might consider trying to overpower the shooter with whatever means are available. To protect your hiding place, lock the door if you can. Block the door with heavy furniture and close, cover, and move away from windows. Hide behind large items such as cabinets or desks. Remain quiet. Silence your cell phone and/or pager. Even the vibration setting can give away a hiding position. When you call 911, remember to tell the operator the location of the active shooter. If there are multiple shooters, physical description of and number of weapons held by the shooter, as well as the number of potential victims at the location. When law enforcement arrives on the scene, their primary goal is to eliminate the threat and stop the shooter as soon as possible. First responders will not be able to stop to help injured persons until the environment is safe. Knowing what to expect will help keep you calm and allow law enforcement to quickly neutralize the threat. Officers may arrive in teams with tactical equipment such as vests, helmets, and rifles. They will need to take command of the situation. Expect to experience officers shouting orders and even pushing people to the ground for their safety. It is possible that officers from multiple jurisdictions will arrive on the scene. When law enforcement officials arrive, it is important that you keep your hands visible at all times. Avoid making any sudden movements. Avoid pointing, screaming, and/or yelling. Put down any items. Immediately raise your hands and spread your fingers. Remain calm and follow instructions. Do not stop to ask officers for help when evacuating. Just proceed in the direction from which officers are entering the location. For more awareness resources, please visit dhs.gov/critical infrastructure.
So the one thing I'll say about the video, there are lots of videos out there. And so if you want to show your spouse, this video, or you want to show it at your place of worship or somewhere else in your life, just make sure you get the right video. Test it first. YouTube has like parody videos out there. They have some that are pretty gruesome. LA County Sheriff's Department did one. Hollywood helped them. And so there's like blood splatter coming out, after the gunshot, all that kind of stuff. So just make sure that it's for the right audience, right? This one didn't have any blood or any of that kind of stuff. So. But if you want to access it, you can find it online. So as far as leaders go, I talked about this earlier. The muscle memory is built into your employees to be looking to you for guidance on a daily basis, projects, work assignments, all that kind of stuff, other issues that happen in the workplace. So if they're trained and conditioned to look to you during those times, they're also potentially going to look to you during times of crises. So just be ready that you've thought through how would you guide your team into making the best decisions possible. Maybe consider, how would you evacuate them? Where would you tell them to shelter in place? Again, these are kind of discussions you can go back and have as a team, now that you have this information. We do have active shooter how to respond program materials. We can just show them so there's posters and there's booklets and there's these little handy dandy wallet cards so that way if an active shooter incident occurs, you can stop, pull out your wallet, refer to the back side or the front side, depending on which language you speak. Now, I don't, it's kind of funny that we came up with this. I don't know why they came up with those, but somebody thought it was a good idea. And so they are available. You can download them from our website. And again, they're linked from your internal website. We do, though, have this free course that's on the FEMA Emergency Management Institute, EMI. Don't get too hung up over the link, the URL, but if you do go out there and search the active shooter, what you can do, or IS-907, if you do that by Google, it'll take you to the website. You can register and you can take the course for free. If you have, again, somewhere else in your life or your spouse or your kids or something like that, you want to kind of go through it with them, I would go through it yourself, first. It kind of just expands upon the video you just watched and just ask some questions and put you through some mental, thoughts about what you would do in your environment. It takes about 45 minutes to do, and then you can actually take a final exam that's, generates a score and a certificate if you're so interested. If you were going to invest any time immediately into doing training, again, I would say that your internal CalPERS portal that was filmed here, that was just done really, really well, that asked some scenario-based questions about suspicious packages and things like that. I would take that first and then think about doing ours, potentially later. We do have See Something, Say Something. We do have See Something, Say Something materials. We'll be working with your staff to determine if that's appropriate for the site here. But we can do those if you're interested at other locations, again, like I mentioned. Now we're good. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to ask for questions, and then I will end with this part of the discussion. So, are there any questions at the moment? And if we do have any questions, just make sure we get a mic to you before you ask. Looks like maybe we have one from the other room, or no? Do we have a question from the other room?
Yes, we have.
Awesome.
3 questions.
Okay, great.
So the first question is, almost all victims of mass shootings have been unarmed. If the proposed prevention and action plan fails, how can we defend ourselves, especially since we are not allowed to be armed ourselves? In other words, how can we fight back?
Great. I am going to hold that question till I hit the last bullet on the run, hide, fight discussion we're going to have at the very end, but I promise you that I'll address it.
The second question is, I believe people do not report or follow the See Something, Say Something out of fear that they are wrong and fear the report being revealed to the person identified as a possible threat and other coworkers. Is this process confidential until a real or valid threat is determined?
The answer to that is yes, and I'm looking to the emergency management department team here for the confirmation. Yeah, we just did the tabletop exercise a couple of weeks ago, and that was a question that came up was, can employees report things either anonymously, which I talked earlier about the ethics number, right? I said that you can do it that way, but is it confidential once the information is reported? And yeah, I mean, there are things going on in people's lives all the time that get reported to human resources or management, and so it's already occurring, so it's not like you're gonna be the first one ever to report something. Some people choose to self-report, right? If they've got a restraining order against somebody, they might go to Colliers and they might go to their management and let them know so that if that person comes on campus and they're identified, they can be addressed really easily. But as far as the confidentiality goes, yeah, that's a core part of any process like this is, I kind of jokingly said with the management team, like, what you don't want to do is Jim comes in to report on, Jeff, and as soon as Jim leaves your office, you're like, hey, Jeff, come here. I heard you're all screwed up and you're being a jerk, right? You don't want to do that, right? So you do need to maintain a level of confidentiality, and that's the way to, once you have that process and you have that trust in place, that's the way to build a sense of comfort and confidence that your employees can share the information. If you don't want to share it internal to the workplace and you want to share it with law enforcement instead, you're welcome to do that as well. It doesn't have to be a 911 type issue. You can call the non-emergency line. You can report it if it's not, especially if it's not here in the workplace. If it's at your place of worship, you can share it with your imam, your rabbi, your priest, your pastor, whatever it is. Let them know so they can let the safety team know. But again, it should always be handled in a confidential manner.
Our final question is, what if you know someone who is exhibiting the indicators but does not work here? What should you do to help them? Who should you report it to and how?
Sure. So everything is situational dependent. It would be hard to cover all scenarios, but let's say that you have a great relationship with that person and they trust you and you can help get them connected with resources through maybe your county health department or through if it's a family member, through maybe your insurance plan. Those are probably the best, least aggressive ways to go. But if you just you've exhausted all of your other ways of trying to help them one-on-one, then again, as I'll refer back to contacting, whether it's you contact mental health services in your county, or you contact the police department on their non-emergency line. On the non-emergency line, if it's just kind of building towards something, I want to caveat that by saying if somebody makes a social media post that says I'm going to such and such and I'm going to harm people or something like that leads you to believe they're going and there's an imminent threat, you do 911, right? But if it's just sort of a building up of statements or rhetoric or something and you want to get some assistance, you can call law enforcement and have the conversation. It still requires, if you call law enforcement, they still have to do an investigation. They still have to do records checks. They still have to go and make contact with the individual and have a conversation. They are not rolling up in a nondescript van, sliding open the door, bagging them, dragging them off for a beating and waterboarding, right? That's not happening. So it's appropriate to report it to law enforcement. If you have some reason to be concerned about that, then maybe go with the mental health department in your county if that's if that makes you feel better and that's related to the situation. Thank you for the questions from the other room, or if those were submitted online. Thank you, guys. Any questions in the room? Okay, I am going to hang out afterwards. We're not quite done, though. I want to finish this last part of the conversation. Okay, so for approximately 2 hours now, I'm here from DHS. I'm a Marine. You might think that I'm hey, let's get in the fight, all that kind of stuff. No. I've talked to you guys. I spent an hour talking to you guys about the Employee Assistance Program. I sprinkled employee assistance and prevention type discussion into the second hour even. I am a huge believer in prevention. I shared with you that I believe that even the people who perpetrate the attacks are victims themselves of the life situations that they went through and the torture, mental torment they were going through, or whatever was going on in their life that made them feel that that was their only option. I have shared with you in following the video and leading up to it that if you can get distance between yourself and the perpetrator of the attack, that's what you're going to do. So from a run standpoint, that is the number one thing that you can do is put distance between yourself and the threat, right? When that evil is outside that door right there, we're going to go out those doors and we're going to put distance between ourselves and the threat. If we hear gunfire on both sides and we're not sure if we can go out into that lobby, okay, then we're kind of stuck, right? Unless we can exit out some back exit here. I'm going to put as much space between myself and that threat as possible. I'm going to do that for two reasons. One is I just want to totally be away from and removed from the situation, and especially if I've got family members or my kids with me or something like that, I want to be totally far away. And the reason for that, the other reason for that, or part of that reason, is because I shoot. I know how hard it is to hit a target at distance and do it well, right? So the greater distance I can put between myself and the threat, that's what I want to do. So I encourage you, whether you can run, walk quickly, crawl, or you have mobility challenges, and you are on some sort of assisted device or wheels, you get as far away from the threat as you can. There will be situations where you can't do that, right? Where the situation is happening right outside the conference room that you're in. And in those situations, you have to hide as best you can. And I talked earlier about the difference between hiding behind something that just kind of conceals your the person being able to see you, and cover, which actually prevents you from ideally from being shot, even if somebody was shooting in your direction, or from some sort of ricochet. Okay? So if you can't run, you hide, right? And you hide, you find the best, this is the hide and seek game of your life, right? Literally. So you find the best possible hiding space you can. Ideally, if it doesn't restrict movement, that's awesome. Make sure, like they said on the video, you silence your cell phone and, you know, be as quiet as you can and get as tiny of a little, you know, object as you can become. You only hide until you can run again, right? So like, let's say the shots happen over here is kind of what we're hearing. And they start here, and we're hiding because we're not sure if we're gonna go that way because they could just be walking around the corner. But the gunfire continues to work its way down that way, fainter and fainter and fainter of a sound, right? And if that's occurring, as soon as they get to a point where you feel like maybe you could make it out these doors, you run, right? And you run and keep on running. Now, don't run to like San Francisco from here unless they're chasing after you with a knife, right? But run to a couple blocks away, right? Run till you get to a point where you can be reasonably safe, call 911, make the report, maybe let your family member know you're okay. Okay, if you run to a certain point and then all of a sudden you're running and now you hear, you've made it out this door, you made it across the street and now you hear gunfire again and you don't think you can keep running around the corner, then you know what? Duck down, hide behind that electrical transformer, hide behind that engine block on that car, right? Until you get an opportunity to get up and run again, and then run. A moving target is really hard to hit. So run and hide and get away, right? But this last part, this fight part, I'm okay with interpersonal violence. I'm okay with putting my hands on you and you putting your hands on me and us going toe-to-toe and going at it. But I was a hand-to-hand combat instructor in the Marine Corps and I've gotten in a lot of fights in my life and I don't mind that. But not everybody in the room is going to be in that situation. Some people don't ever want to get involved in interpersonal violence, and that's okay most of the time. But that person out there who decided to come in here today and shoot that gun and might try to take your life is going to take you away from the people that love you, the people that you love, the cat, the dog, the goldfish, the whatever, the camping trip you're supposed to go on, the trip to Florida, whatever, right? The hike you've been building on and wanting to go to that's on your bucket list that you have tickets for to go to Nepal, right? Whatever it is that you love, that you care about, that evil does not get to take that away from you and take you away from other people. So if that evil gets to a point where you can't run and you can't hide, you have to go at it. And you got to enter that fight. It is the fight for your life. So there was a question earlier about what do you do in a fight for your life in a situation where you're not allowed to bring weapons. Okay, you might not have access to traditional weapons, right? You may not be able to bring in, you're not allowed to bring in firearms, all right? You may not be able to bring in some other, less than lethal type objects or weapons. But I'm sure they don't have a ban on water bottles, right? And so if somebody was poking their arm with a gun in hand through that door and all I had access to was my water bottle, with all that adrenaline rushing through my body, do you think I might be able to come down on their wrist and shatter their wrist and knock their weapon out of their hand and disable them? Yeah. And if I do that, what's my next thing that I'm supposed to think about? What's the very first thing on this list? I'm running, right? I kick that gun and I'm out, right? So I try to go, right? But if you don't have access to a water bottle, you're in a conference room, you left your water bottle, right? Is there a chair there? Yeah. Is there a fire extinguisher? Yeah. Could you really do some serious damage with a fire extinguisher? Yes. Am I advocating that after you knock them down the first time and the gun is gone and they're clearly like disabled on the ground, that you stay in there and continue to wail on them for 30 minutes? No, right? You get it out of their hand, you get them down, and you run, right? And you help others get past, okay? So that's what I'm advocating. On the fire extinguisher, if you don't feel like you can lift it over your head and use it as a weapon, guess what? Pull the pin, stand there, and as soon as that door opens, spray them right in the face, right? Just disable them for just a little bit, enough to push through and get out of the way, okay? A moving target is very, very difficult to hit. So on this fighting part, again, I'm not advocating fighting just in general. I didn't come in at the first moment and talk for the last 2 hours all about fighting. I saved it for the very end because I want it to be the last resort for you. But if you have to engage, you go, and you go hard. And if you don't know how to hit, and you don't know how to punch, and you don't know how to swing something, you know what? Now's the time to go to that local martial arts studio that you have in your community and go take a few lessons, okay? Local law enforcement even sometimes offers like self-defense type classes. So if you need that, then go get it, right? The training is available. But don't let the absence of training stop you from going home to the ones you love, So I want to say with that, thank you guys very much for the opportunity to come out here today. My wife works for the state of California. I used to work for the state of California. We appreciate what you guys do on the retirement system side. And I appreciate really the relationship with the emergency management team here and your leadership. So thank you guys for your time and attention. If anybody has anything they didn't want to talk about to the group and they want to talk about, awesome. I'll turn my mic off this time before you come up and talk about personal things. Didn't do that the last time. And then if you have anything that's to CalPERS, policy, that kind of stuff, talk to your team leader or come up and talk to emergency management. Thank you guys.